having problems screening the PowerPoint. I don't know if you can see it right now. Let me see. There? Yes. Okay.
Good. That's good.
Good. Okay, we're going to be addressing strategies or advanced strategies used in simultaneous interpreting. It's something that we all use. All professional interpreters have been using these strategies, either consciously or unconsciously, okay? Now, let me see. Strategies are intentional, and they are described as a goal-oriented procedures. Interpreters use them to solve or prevent problems, and the demanding working conditions of the interpreter, especially nowadays with remote simultaneous interpreting, requires us to adopt all sorts of strategies to interpret successfully, especially with event organizers and speakers now that are cramming too much in just a few minutes. Okay, so what are the constraints that we have? Well, most of you are interpreters, so I will have to tell you that we have constraints due to high time pressure, fast delivery, high information density, and familiar topics. This may drive the interpreter's processing capacity to the point of saturation, thus causing us problems. Additionally, there's a knowledge gap that we have that may also pose problems. So to solve or prevent those problems, that's why we need to adopt these simultaneous interpretation strategies. And it's what I've been teaching in the advanced courses at the National Institute. Now, I said that strategies are used either consciously or unconsciously. However, they become unconscious and automatic for whom? For the professional interpreters. This was research that was done by Zanetti dating back to 1999. And it is then that the interpreters reduce the cognitive load, because only if strategies are activated automatically will the interpreter overcome his or her capacity limitations to make the best use of our processing capacity. Okay? Now, this is not the case of novices. There's research done by Barbara Moser that happened to be one of my teachers at the University of Geneva. And she said that one categorization about conscious or unconscious strategies is a division between the knowledge base and the skill-based strategies. Now, the knowledge base is the result of conscious analytical processes. The skill-based strategies being the results of procedural knowledge that have been internalized or automated. It is found that experts' performance is more automatic than that of novices or than of students. Okay, so Barbara's work has been the source of inspiration for many researchers, pointing to the need of development of strategy use from conscious to automated. Why do we need to master strategies? And people keep asking me, especially students, are these strategies teachable? Because when I studied interpretation back in the 90s, this was not taught. Now, the multitasking nature of interpretation imposes severe cognitive demands. These constraints, what they do is they force us to engage in competitive activities with the multitasking. So we have factors that may cause comprehension and production difficulties that include the division of attention that we have between listening and note-taking, for example, in consecutive interpreting, or even listening and production in simultaneous. Also, the high time pressure, plus right now, we have a new factor, the extreme speech conditions that we may have in remote simultaneous interpreting because of the bad quality audio that we have, plus the new information, the information density, contextualized elements like figures, proper names, listings, high speech rate, syntax, non-native speakers with strong accents, and the awkward syntactic structure that sometimes we have to deal with. So these are some of the comments that were made and they were posted online, as a matter of fact, this weekend. Some of the interpreters were complaining about pre-recorded presentations. They said they were cramming 15-minute speeches into, I don't know, 10-minute slots. So basically what clients have done is they have recorded or pre-recorded videos, and then they speed up at 1.25 times the normal speed. So some of them argued that some standard contracts include clauses right now relating to the interpreter pre-recorded material. For example, that the script has to be provided in advance, that there cannot be any music overlay or background music. Some of them said that the pace was so fast that they could not even do the handover to the other interpreter. Okay, so if this happens and we have better, or no, not better, but worse working conditions, we better make use of the simultaneous interpretation strategies that will help us overcome these challenges. Okay, this was this went viral a few weeks ago. It says stop cramming 10-minute speeches into 5-minute slots. Now, the unsatisfying working environment, as I said, poor sound quality, we have to put up with remote simultaneous interpreting these days. We as interpreters may have limited working memory capacity, sometimes even deficient linguistic abilities, and even insufficient extra linguistic knowledge. Because of this, the interpreter may not be able to produce the high quality target speech that we intend to deliver. Okay, so there was a researcher called Daniel Gili that in very clear words, he says, if the required processing capacity to interpret the source speech exceeds the interpreter's ability processing capacity at any given time, problems will arise. So in order to cope with the problems encountered, we as interpreters have to allocate the available processing capacity that we have strategically during the comprehension of the source speech and the production of the target speech and monitoring of output, the three things, okay? So here we have that these strategies can therefore be categorized into comprehension strategies, production, and monitoring or global strategies. Here I included some of the names of the researchers that have done or that have published many papers in this regard. Now, the use of these strategies, they need to be automatic so as to save the cognitive capacity for complex operations. Although some of the strategies violate the principle of faithfulness in interpreting, I totally understand that. Strategies help us use a minimum amount of processing effort for maximum meaning delivery. They can ease, for example, the cognitive strain that we have. And what else? They can overcome emergencies. And that is why researchers argue that interpreters resort to a number of strategies that may ease the burden and improve the pace of delivery, okay? Now, some interpreting strategies are present in monolingual communication. For example, with repair, there's inference, there's waiting, there's stalling, while others are specific to interpreting. For example, anticipation, compression, addition, omission, or even changing the order. More than one strategy can be applied at a certain point in interpreting, as we will see in some of the 12 track recordings I have prepared for you guys today, okay? For example, the use of chunking or segmentation sometimes is linked or associated with anticipation, with waiting, with stalling. The same goes for coping with source text complexity or even coping with speech structure. Now, there are disadvantages. The use of strategies may result in potential information loss, credibility loss on the part of the audience, time and processing capacity costs, as it is widely discussed in research done over the last years. Now, for example, the use of omission and compression may lead to loss of information. The frequent use of repair, if I keep repairing terms, or if I keep making mistake and repairing as I go and I navigate the sentences, this may harm my credibility as an interpreter. So the use of waiting means loss of time, and then we keep storing information in memory, and that temporarily increases our cognitive load, okay? And by the way, the literature does not differentiate between the strategies and the tactics. Right now, we're going to see some of the most commonly used strategies in Simultaneous, okay? For example, here there's a list of the most commonly used strategies. We have summarization, compression, condensing, okay, the same. Omission can be used to deal with fast delivery, with redundancy in both consecutive and simultaneous. The use of omission or deletion helps the interpreter cope with external difficulties such as high delivery rate, high information density, repetition, redundancy, and especially whenever we cannot understand somebody speaking with a strong accent. I have a couple of examples to show you today. Also, we have anticipation. Here, the research done by Zanetti. That is a strategy to cope with morphosyntactic differences between the source and the target language. But this strategy is constantly adopted during simultaneous interpretation as a powerful tool, even between languages which are syntactically similar, okay? And the syntaxes could be identical. Now, these strategies are used to cope with constraints that are shared by all modes of interpreting, whether it is simultaneous, consecutive, or even simultaneous with text. Now, because of its higher time pressure, the interpreter is being externally paced by the speaker and the multitasking between the listening, the speaking, and the monitoring that we do. And is more demanding cognitively speaking, and thus requires the use of strategies that are not necessarily used probably in consecutive or in monolingual communication. My students keep asking me, are these strategies teachable? Okay. Coping tactics or these strategies are an essential practical skill in interpretation. Basically, they are taught within the framework of practical exercises. That's the only way of teaching them. In most training programs, this is done by trial and error, trial and correction, with trial on the student's part and corrections from the part of instructors, okay? Such corrections are generally normative, but instructors sometimes refer to the communication impact of the tactics in order to explain their preferences. But the instructors sometimes are not necessarily aware of the factors which influence these strategies, because seldom have they read theory or do research on them. This presentation that I'm giving right now attempts to provide the instructors, you practitioners in the industry, and the students that are here with us today with a list of the basic coping tactics or strategies. So I am presenting a conceptual framework that describes the advantages, the drawbacks of each tactic, and discusses a few rules which may help you or which may help explain what interpreters prefer. In simultaneous interpretation, we are at the mercy of the speaker and must learn to construct his sentences with flexibility, especially when interpreting from and into languages with different syntax. We must also be prepared to handle heavy or verbose speech, to change the order of sentences, to cut those lengthy sentences into several short ones, and even find vague expressions and padding to overcome the usual difficulties. That is, well, you're waiting for the speaker to clarify something that is incomprehensible. Now, the most important thing is self-monitoring. Self-monitoring is one of the downsides to simultaneous interpreting, and it's sometimes due to the speed in which the message needs to be conveyed. The interpreter isn't able to catch everything, leading to some omissions of the message or nuances of the speech. It is important for an interpreter to self-monitor all the time and to make sure he's on top of the game. And this is one of the disadvantages that students have, because self-monitoring for them is very, very difficult. I wish I had been taught these strategies during my training. Now, let's go to the practical part of my presentation. And we are going to see how to employ these tactics. And by way of example, I'll be using dual track recordings with a corresponding translation, I'm sorry, into my A language, that is going to be Spanish. These recordings come from live events, and that is why we're going to see exactly the delays, the anticipation, the inference, repair strategies. So I wish I could provide you with more examples, but it has been so time-consuming to go over many recordings in my repository. Like yesterday, I spent 15 hours trying to find them. Luckily, most of them are in dual track. First strategy is anticipation. The interpreter predicts the incoming text and produces a target segment before it is uttered by the speaker. Based on what? Linguistic cues, lexical collocations, suprasegmental features, certain syntactic structures, etc. And knowledge cues as well, understanding about the topic, the speech context, etc. Now, in particular, the two working languages have asymmetrical structures, SOV versus SVO languages, okay? So here we are going to analyze a speaker, famous president of the United States, Bill Clinton, said what he said, and what he's basically, we're going to listen to the recording, and we are going to see in what way we can anticipate what he's saying, okay? For you, it's going to be better if you use headphones, okay? You know why? Because when I play the dual track recording, you'll be able to hear probably better the clear sound, like totally split from left to the right ear. So make sure that you grab a pair of headphones, and we continue in a second. Now, let me see. Yes, here.
When the terrorist incidents occurred in the United Kingdom a couple of years ago, I think even though they didn't claim as many lives as we lost in the United States on 9/11, I think the thing that troubled the British most was that the perpetrators were not invaders, but homegrown citizens whose religious and political identities were more important to them than the people they grew up with, went to school with, worked with, shared weekends with, shared meals with.
All right. We're going to see the anticipation triggers here. The minute I hear terrorist incidents, United Kingdom, I know what's coming. I could anticipate words like 9/11, the United States, perpetrators, homegrown citizens, okay? Lives lost. So basically by the time he says terrorist, I could anticipate immediately many of the things that I have to translate. Let's see.
Sin embargo, ahora cuando los incidentes terroristas ocurrieron en el Reino Unido hace 2 años, aunque no se llevaron muchas bajas como el 11 de septiembre, el problema fue que en Inglaterra no eran gente de afuera, sino ciudadanos británicos.
Okay, so by doing that, I could compress some of the ideas and find some kind of economic way of expression of condensing and summarizing the semantic content, okay? What can be anticipated? Everything that is in blue, okay? So imagine how powerful the strategy of anticipation is if I can anticipate and have more or less like a mini glossary beforehand. It would be great to have the PowerPoint or the transcript, but or the script, but not so many people give it to the interpreters in time. Okay, so when you start using these strategies, your rendering becomes more direct, less literal, more condensed, and straight to the point. Strategies are sometimes intertwined since one strategy can lead you to apply another. For example, with anticipation, that leads to compression, and we're going to see the strategy of compression is where the interpreter finds that economic way of expression by summarizing and generalizing the semantic content of the original, deleting what is repetitive or redundant, and selecting the most important information, in particular when facing high time pressure, okay? So what can be compressed? Exactly.
Whose religious and political identities were more important to them than the people they grew up with, went to school with, worked with, shared weekends with, shared meals with. In other words, they thought their differences were more important than their common humanity. It is the central psychological plague of humankind in the 21st century.
As you can see, for example, the lives they shared is a summary of people they grew up with, went to school with, worked with, share weekends with, share meals with, okay? So it can be compressed and you won't be losing any relevant information there. There are different anticipation strategies that I'll present here. For example, here, the interpreter predicts the incoming text and produces a target text segment before it is uttered by the speaker based on the linguistic cues. That's what I said before. We pay attention to the lexical collocations, the suprasegmental features, syntactic structures. For example, even in Spanish, if I hear me va a hacer un sándwich de jamón y, I know that is queso, okay? I could easily anticipate that it's queso, okay? It's a ham and cheese sandwich. So you have also strategies that are called adaptation strategies, okay? But going back to the anticipation strategies that we were seeing just a minute ago, imagine that the interpreter's anticipation mechanism relies heavily on cumulative redundancy, which is the result of combining different types of inferences at different levels of discourse and the range of probability anticipation, okay? Now, we may profit from the redundancy, this redundancy, by paying attention to the information structure of discourse. Interpreters may find dense information peaks or even referential chains. This discussion is illustrated with examples of redundancy in political speeches, especially. What helps us with anticipation, apart from having a PowerPoint or a transcript, as I said at the beginning, are the referential chains of information and the linguistic cues. So you can use anticipation a lot, especially in those speeches on a specific topic that you interpret on a regular basis that you may have become an expert in, okay? Let me see. We're going to see adaptation right now. Adaptation is the interpreter adapts the source message so that it fits the target discourse conventions or culture. For example, we're going to see this. There's no way that I could translate this into Spanish. Let me see here.
In fact, in a number of US states, you need less information. You need to provide less information to get a company than you do to get a library card.
Okay, for example, in Argentina, there's no way that we could translate this ending like this, okay? We would say probably the Metro card, like the subway card, something like that, or any membership card. But it's not part of the culture, and we need to adapt that to the conventions or culture of our target audience. There may be also slight adaptation strategies. We're going to see what happens here. Let me see. Okay. There's something with the Russian doll here.
Baffling and confusing and hard to understand how this sort of offshore world works. I like to think of it a bit like a Russian doll. So you can have one company stacked inside another company, stacked inside another company, making it almost impossible to really understand who is behind these structures.
Now, here, for example, in Spanish, if I say una muñeca rusa, people are going to understand, but it's going to take them a while. Check the translation and how it was adapted. I'm sure that you can anticipate what I'm going to say.
Pienso que esto muchos lo encuentran confuso y difícil de entender cómo funciona este mundo offshore, ¿no? Yo lo pondría como si fuese una mamushka. No tenemos una empresa dentro de otra empresa, haciendo lo que sea imposible.
So if I say mamushka, basically it was more direct. It could be understood in a second. And I'm not confusing the audience with any Russian or any other nationalities, okay? Then remember that I said that some of the strategies may lead to other strategies. For example, here we have adaptation and repetition strategy. Now, the interpreter repeats previously processed information by means of synonyms as a way of enhancing the accuracy or the lexical accuracy. Here, there's some preamble that is not transcribed, okay? But I'm going to show you part of this audio, what comes before, because it was a presentation on financial statements. So we were discussing gross income tax, operating revenue, and things like that. And all of a sudden, we have this, that it was our bid slate, okay? So we had to adapt it. I mean, they meant that they were going to, if the company or the supplier met those requirements or conditions, they could join the list of bidders, okay, or suppliers that could provide companies with services and goods. Now, let's see what happened. But this came out of blue. We were interpreting, I don't know, a balance sheet. Let's see.
And then the net profit, this is the profit for the year divided by the sales by the year. It was 5% the first year, 9.5% the second year, and then 10%. Not extraordinary, but certainly in the right direction. And many companies would be more than happy to have that today. And then the gross profit, you remember that was the sales less the cost of sales. Here, the ratio was 40% the first year, 43% the next year, 48%. This company, we would have no problem putting them on our bid slate, because they look healthy. And that's how easy it is.
So imagine that all of a sudden we are faced with this word and we need to come up with an adaptation. In this case, you're going to see a repetition of the word. Okay, let me see here.
La inversión bastante bueno. Y luego la utilidad neta, que es la utilidad del ejercicio dividido por las ventas o facturación del ejercicio, 5%, segundo 9,5% y para el tercero 10%. No es extraordinario, pero ciertamente está en el sentido adecuado. Y muchas empresas estarían muy contentas de tener este tipo de utilidad neta. Y luego tenemos la ganancia bruta, que es la facturación menos el costo de las ventas. Acá tenemos una relación de un 40%, 43% para el segundo ejercicio y 48% para el tercero. Esta empresa no tendría ningún problema como para ponerlas en la clasificación de oferentes, ¿no? Como para licitar. Así de fácil. Vamos a hacer el cálculo.
So basically what I had to do there, I said, okay, we will put this or these companies, or we will classify them as bidders, or so they have the possibility to provide the service or licitar, I said, okay? So in this way, by repeating, I am trying to come up with an equivalent, okay? Because this is the only tool that I have in order to adapt the translation in this way. Now, also we have another strategy. The other strategy is waiting. It's very difficult for my students sometimes to wait because they feel that they're gonna miss out a lot of information. So people tend to navigate sentences adrift. They don't know where they're going. They don't know if they're going to finish the sentence successfully. I always tell them that they should apply décalage. It has many meanings. It could be described as waiting, delaying response, stalling, tailing, okay? And it's when the interpreter waits and delays his or her production, or produces a generic utterance that are probably absent in the source discourse and provide no new information by stalling, so as to enable the interpreter to access more incoming text for meaning disambiguation. Now, I'm going to tell you what happened here. Here we have the conference that was organized that originally was going to be held for 150 to 150 people. The client calls me a few days later and says, Martin, attendees have reached 1,000. And then the following week, 1,500, and they ended up with 2,000 people registered. This was a university and they had no means of renting the infrared equipment, because you know that the infrared equipment may be expensive and is rented out by boxes of 100 receivers, 50 receivers or so. So to rent 2,000 infrared receivers was out of the question for them. So the solution, or what we did is I said, okay, consecutive. And they said, no, can do, because we have this speaker that is coming, that is being brought by the Embassy of Finland. And the Finn is going to speak for 45 minutes, but there are other speakers that are going to be presenting for another 2 hours. So it's a 3-hour conference and we cannot afford to have consecutive interpretation. I said, okay, the only thing that you can do is to do some kind of simultaneous interpretation, like being the interpreters in the booth. And what they did is they connected the booth through the loudspeakers. That is kind of a challenge because it's not the same having a voice over a microphone. And then, you know, that the infrared devices, they have some kind of an attenuation chip or device that if you start blowing or speaking too fast or raising your voice, that sound is being attenuated by the receiver. That doesn't happen with the loudspeakers. So you need to be keeping the distance all the time, like probably, I don't know, 10 inches all the time without moving, for fear that the volume was going to, or that there was going to be feedback or some kind of an explosion or loudspeaker. But little did I know that I was going to be faced with a speaker that her accent was far from being okay. Okay. I thought, well, she's European. All Europeans are great at speaking. And she could be understood, but still there were some problems in the way she talked. Let me play the audio for you to see what happened.
I will share my presentation today, 3 parts. First, I'm telling a little bit about background, our new national curriculum, new comprehensive school program and teacher education reform. And after that background, I'm going to tell about our network and innovative school model, how we are supporting schools to do things in practice. And after that, third part is about design-based research, what we are doing. It's short part.
Okay. Do we understand the speaker? Yes. Do we understand every single thing she says? No, we don't. Translation.
I will share my presentation today, 3 parts. First, I'm telling a little bit about background, our new national curriculum, new comprehensive school program and teacher education reform. And after that background, I'm going to tell about our network and innovative school model, how we are supporting schools to do things in practice. And after that, third part is about design-based research, what we are doing. It's short part.
Okay, quite a challenge. Let's see how we did this in Simultaneous, and you're going to see how we lag behind at the very beginning, because it was the only way of doing it. I mean, we had to wait to see what she meant by, let me see this part.
I will share my presentation today, 3 parts.
Vamos a dividir la presentación en 3 componentes, en 3 partes. Primero les voy a contar algo acerca de Finlandia, lo que es el plan de estudios nacional, la reforma de formación docentes, también la red INOCAS y el modelo de escuelas innovadoras y cómo apoyamos esto en la práctica. Después de esto, sobre la investigación basada en el diseño y lo que estamos haciendo.
Okay, so by applying the collage, I could get most of it. I had to change background for Finland. I remembered that I had read something about Innokua, that was the name of the network of the innovative school model, and I said, okay, it was in Finnish. And I said, in order to get rid of that modification that I had to do, I said the name of the network, and I'm done. Okay. So it was a way of dealing by delaying my response, especially because she said, I will say my presentation today in 3 parts. First, tell a little bit about background. So it was very difficult because I was like waiting and delaying the response. And I wanted to receive like new information, so I kept stalling, and finally I could produce or render that. Now, also there's the collage plus stalling plus inference strategies. Same speaker. Yes, same speaker. Let's see what she did now.
In Finland, the education are always nowadays thought to be that it should be equal for all students. And that means that all schools in Finland are following our national curriculum. There are only few private schools. Most of the Finnish schools are public schools.
Okay, problem here with education, okay? And then I had a plural verb, are. I said there's no way that there was a mismatch between what I was having as a subject and then the verb. Okay, so by applying the clash, I could wait, delay the response, and let's see what happened.
En preescolar.
In Finland, the
En Finlandia,
are always nowadays thought to be that it should be equal.
la educación implica tener un plano de igualdad para todos los alumnos y todas las escuelas de Finlandia siguen lo que es el plan de estudios nacional. Hay algunos colegios privados.
Okay, as you can see, it was endless, okay? When she said education, okay? But we had to deal in this way and more or less we could overcome that challenge of having a strong accent. So especially we apply the clash, the strategy. Sometimes when we cannot understand that or when we haven't received enough input of information. But in this case, it was very difficult because it was applying the clash along the 45 minutes of her speech, okay? And that is very, very tiring. Let's continue with the next strategy. This is more related to intonation. Okay, it's called pause distribution. Pauses serve to divide discourse into tone groups and meaning units in oral communication. What I'm going to do as an interpreter right now is use the pauses strategically to assist the audience or to assist communicating content to the audience, okay? Let's see what happens. Again, this is another foreign speaker. I think another European, I believe that he was Dutch. And he started in the enumeration, and apart from that, the words were not that simple, started making pauses and it was very, not difficult, but he was not really clear. Let's see what happened. Okay, wait.
Gas is the low end of the hydrocarbon chain. It has 70 to 100% of methane, which is the very simplest combination of carbon and hydrogen, plus some ethane, helium, hydrogen, nitrogen, and CO2.
Okay, did you notice that it was not clear in the part where he had to enumerate all the direct objects? Okay, let's see how we did this by applying the strategy of pause distribution.
Gas is
El gas, por otro lado,
low end
es el extremo más bajo de la cadena de hidrocarburos. Tienen entre un 70 y un 100% de metano, que en realidad es la combinación más sencilla de carbono e hidrógeno, además de tener etano, helio, hidrógeno, nitrógeno y dióxido de carbono.
Okay. The pause distribution was combined with rising intonation, okay? And that gives the idea of enumeration. Let's go and continue with the next simultaneous interpretation strategy. We have a whole combination right now: elaboration, intonations, well, which I saw, and world knowledge strategies, okay? Intonation, why? Because we as interpreters have to resort to paralinguistic cues in this case, such as the rising intonation or the falling intonation to achieve speech cohesion. And in this way, we help the audience or the listeners to disambiguate the intended meaning of the utterance. Also, we're going to see text expansion or elaboration. Sometimes it's called addition. is where the interpreters keep adding something that is absent in the source language or in the source text, such as discourse markers, for example, connectives like therefore, thus, however, and other phrases. So the target text sounds more logical, more coherent, at least for the listener, okay? And then we resort to oral knowledge, is when the interpreter connects the message of the original speech with his or her own knowledge on a given field that probably he's an expert in, okay? So let's see what happens here. Again, another foreigner. What happened here, I think he was Arab. You're gonna see a whole combination of countries, and all of a sudden he starts, by enumerating countries, he starts mixing the name of corporations. And he even shortens the names of those corporations that they may not be clear for the target audience that is listening to the translation, okay? On top of that, then he says something for next, a Schlumberger, that is another company, and then he goes back to Mexico, India, Sudan, and then finishes with, I have seen a lot of people, okay? I think that he meant because of all the trips that he had made and he's very well traveled, that he met a lot of people or colleagues, okay? Let's see.
And I have worked for Nigeria, Japan, Malaysia, Holland, Shell, Saudi. Sonatrach is Algeria. Sonagol is Iraqis. For next, that's Schlumberger, Mexico, India, Sudan. I have seen a lot of people.
Okay. I mean, I could translate this literally. The pace is very, very simple, slow. But if I translate in this way, people or the audience will think that I was making a mistake, okay? And so here we're trying to enhance somehow the translation by applying these strategies that I was telling you about: elaboration, intonation, and world knowledge. Elaboration is going to be applied here because this is the name of a company that is not Saudi's, Saudi something. Then what else? World knowledge and intonation. The intonation, you will see it along in the enumeration. And the rest of the strategy is when I have to explain what next is doing here. Next, I happen to work for them in the past, is the division, the training division of the company Schlumberger, okay? But people sometimes do not know that. I don't know if they still exist. But still, let's see how this was translated. Here you have the solution. The name of the company is called Saudi Aramco, okay?
Este tipo de capacitaciones o talleres. Y ahí trabajé para Nigeria, para Japón, Malasia, Holanda, bueno, Shell, Saudi Aramco, Sonatrach, que está en Argelia, Sonagol es en Irak, Next, que es la empresa de capacitación de Schlumberger, México, India, Sudán. He visto...
Okay, and I have seen a lot of people. He visto mucha gente, I think I said. Anyway, I hope you find these strategies useful. Okay, we're going to analyze right now something that is very, very common. It's called repair and non-repair strategies. They're self-explanatory. Okay, is when the interpreter finds the error in his or her reformulations, but thinks that they are trivial or that corrections cause more harm than help. And we decide to leave them as they are. It is considered a strategic decision because it is a conscious choice not to make repairs. when monitoring the output, which is different to making errors of which the interpreters is not aware, okay? Because sometimes my students get me and they say, or tease me and they say, oh, no, it was a non-repair strategy. No, I said, you didn't understand the speech, okay? And then we have the repair strategy. It's when the interpreter makes corrections, when he or she decides, when they find distortions of the original meaning intended in the interpretation, and then they realize a better way of expressing what has been said, or probably they detect a contradiction, a yes for no, or between his or her anticipation and the incoming discourse. We're going to see what happened here. This was a conference given at the Washington Post. And I said, how could I make, because I make the mistake here with the number. The problem I'm going to tell you right now is the 100 million. I said 100,000 instead of 100 million. So, but yeah, then I noticed what the problem was, because I said, it was full of false starts. We started, never completed a sentence. If you were to tell stops, told me just 4 years ago that we could reach. So with the two false starts, I was trying to get that incoming information, that I focus heavily on that, and then I missed the number. Okay, let's see how we dealt with this strategy. First, we're going to listen to the original, okay?
Donald Trump, 99 million unique visitors in the United States, which is a really, really big number for us. If you were to tell me just 4 years ago that we could reach nearly 100 million unique visitors, I would say no way, no way, impossible. And in fact, Jeff Bezos, when he bought the Washington Post, he said, well, rumor has it, allegedly, no one has confirmed this fact, that he said, you should go for 100 million unique visitors. And we said, no way, absolutely no way. And
okay, let's see what happened in the translation here. I already told you, but I applied a non-repair strategy. I played the fool, and then I tried to fix it with the repair strategy later on in the sentence.
En octubre por Donald Trump. 99 millones de visitantes únicos tuvimos en Estados Unidos, lo que es increíble como estadística. Si ustedes me hubieran preguntado hace 4 años que íbamos a llegar a 100.000, yo les diría no, de ninguna manera. Era imposible llegar a los 100 millones. Y de hecho, Jeff Bezos, cuando compró o adquirió este periódico, el Washington Post, dice, bueno, el rumor dice, nadie confirmó, esto es un rumor, que él dijo que tendríamos que apuntar a estos 100 millones de visitantes únicos y dijimos, no, no hay forma de hacerlo.
Okay, as you can see, I play the fool, no repair, and then I repaired that number within almost the same sentence, okay, with the intonation. Now, also we have other strategies. Right now, there's one that is very, very common. It's called repetition to improve the register. Why? Because the interpreter repeats previously processed information by means of a synonym, okay, as a way of enhancing the accuracy of some of the words. Okay, let's see what happens. It's a very simple thing. The word is sticking, that, and then I replace juntar by some other word that is more formal.
It's the minorities who are sticking together to keep the 80% Sunni population at bay. And the result is a terrible, terrible civil war.
Básicamente de minorías. Se juntan, se agrupan las minorías como para mantener el 80% de la población suní.
Okay, at bay, acorralada. Now, let's go to the other strategy that is called transcoding and visualization. This was the problem. The problem was sponge editing. We have no idea what it was. So what do we do with transcoding? Is when the interpreter is unable to grasp the overall meaning of the original and decides to use a word-for-word approach by sticking to the surface structure of the original language. That's, I mean, I knew that it was esponja, it was exactly the same, and that's what I said, okay?
Sponge editing. So if anyone knows what a sponge is essentially, you're wiping up around the counter and it absorbs water, right? Absorbs everything around you. So why do I call this sponge editing? I call this sponge editing because are you and your team ready for when social media changes?
Okay, so we had to risk that it was a sponge, and this is what we did, and I visualized what a sponge was.
Sponge editing.
Tenemos lo que se llama edición tipo esponja. ¿Saben lo que es una esponja? Cuando nos lavamos en la ducha o lo que usamos en la mesa y se absorbe todo lo que tenemos de agua. ¿Por qué se llama edición esponja? Se llama esponja porque vamos a ver si estamos listos para absorber.
Okay, ready. And finally, the world knowledge strategy. Okay. Here is sometimes what poses a challenge to the millennials and the centennials that I'm teaching right now, that probably they have never read anything about philosophy, theology, economics, okay? And for example, the other time I had a student that it was not in simultaneous interpretation. I also teach simultaneous introduction to simultaneous interpretation somewhere else in a translation major. So I had a student that had no idea what Marxism was or who Engels was. And imagine the translation, okay?
La transición que surgió del socialismo al capitalismo, que es exactamente lo opuesto que Marx y que Engels pronosticaban. Y muchos chistes se hicieron acerca de un país que pasaba por esta transición de socialismo a capitalismo. Aunque los chinos nunca admitían que habían creado una economía capitalista. El término oficial que utilizan los chinos es socialismo de mercado.
Okay, for me it's very, very easy to be acquainted with the Chinese culture since I lived 3 months of the year in Shanghai, okay? So I am aware of their culture, the political issues, and their economy and all of that. Now, by doing that or by living in China, I could easily resort to my world knowledge. And here, the interpreter can connect the message to the original speech with his world knowledge or knowledge on a given field. Okay, in this case, Engels developed what is known as Marxism together with Karl Marx. And I think it was in the 1800s that they published a book. It was The Condition of the Working Class or something like that, based on personal observations, okay? So this was the end of my talk. I just had these strategies to present. There are quite a few more, but I was running out of time, okay? As a matter of fact, the strategies are classified in knowledge-based, language-based, and meaning-based. I will try to, there's a follow-up email that we will be sending, and probably we can copy a summary of the presentation or a PDF, the PDF that could be easily downloadable from a link, okay? Are there any questions that I would gladly take questions? I know that, oh, there's one question here says, will we have a copy of the presentation? Yes, we will. and it's going to be recorded and it's going to be posted later on tomorrow. Okay. Then what else? The recording. Okay, there's a question about associations. Do you agree to interpret without a partner interpreter if the length of the interpretation is 45 minutes? I do. I have to. Okay, we have a different rule here in South America that probably doesn't match the European one. By the local association standards here, we have to work for an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, so I have to. Yes, she was Finnish. Also, would you please send the notes or PowerPoint presentations to us? Yeah, no, not a problem. Can you explain 5 exercises to practice those strategies in simultaneous interpreting? Yes. The way I practice this with my students is the following, okay? I make sure that I make a demo of everything that we're doing in class, and they try to follow my lead. They try to copy and to replicate the same strategy later on, and by doing that, they were able to apply them later on during the year in other speeches, okay, that were new to them. But it's not going to be easy. I mean, it's not that you're going to be reading the theory on simultaneous interpretation strategies and applying them overnight. It's going to take them, it's going to take time. And apart from that, even interpreters, professional interpreters, do not know that they are using these strategies unconsciously. Okay. Can you recommend the framework for analyzing simultaneously interpreted speeches? What I could do is I could post a few speeches in dual track, and I will post, as a matter of fact, one that could be an hour long if you want to, for somebody that said if we could interpret more than 45 minutes. And by doing that, you can more or less copy the same style. What I do recommend is there's a repository or there's a website. I think it's, well, the United Nations website is one, where you have all the recordings of all the booths, all the language combinations. So you can listen to the floor, and later on you can listen to the interpretation. However, by doing that, you're not going to see many simultaneous interpretation strategies. You're not going to see any compression, condensation, or summarizing. You're going to see some decalage, some weighting, pause distribution and intonation especially, but as they are doing simul with text, you're not going to have the most important strategies applied there that are compression or anticipation because they have the text, okay? It says, when you have attendees who don't speak Spanish, can you give a clear explanation of the words you use in Spanish? Yes, mamushka was the Russian doll. I'm sure that is Russian. And then I said ham and cheese sandwich, okay? Why don't they change the industry standards there so you can have a team interpret to switch every 25 minutes? I don't know. It's been forever like this here, okay? Yes, Silvina is asking me if I'm a teacher at the Argentine Institute of Translation and Interpretation, and yes, I'm the director. And Amalia, for example, is co-teaching with me, and so is Tatiana, and so is Rafaela, and other interpreters, okay? Many interpreters, there's another question here, it says, many interpreters sound flat. What is that? And how do you feel about making your voice inflection to convey emotion? In some of the recordings in dual tracks that I have, sometimes it's not about conveying emotion, but using the pauses in the delivery based strategies effectively. Okay, if you use good pause distribution, good intonation, rising intonation when it's appropriate. I mean, you're not going to be using rising intonation because it's going to be useless all the time. Okay, if you can get by with some of the repairs or the self corrections, and they do not raise any flags, that is going to be quite effective. Okay, and then you have the decision for no repair. Okay, but it depends on the self monitoring and everything that you do in booth. Okay, John is asking how to teach the strategies in classes. What I said is the only thing that we do is by doing demos all the time. I get in the booth with my students. I think that like a good percentage of the class is like 30%, more than that, 40% is making a demonstration in the booth with one of the students, and then listening to the teacher, and then trying to perform the same kind of rendition. Okay. There's another question. It says, theoretical framework for research purposes. Okay. In the presentation, what I did is I included the name of authors and the date when the paper was published. So if you can Google that, I'm sure that you can find out anything that has to do with the research.
Martin, we're having questions from all over the world, really. It's amazing. There's another question here. Look, good evening. I was wondering if there is anything you could recommend as a way to acquire more world knowledge for those who may not yet have the chance to travel or have first-hand contact with other cultures, because not everybody is as lucky as you.
Okay. For example, in it's difficult. Well, right now with the pandemic, it's very, very difficult to travel to foreign countries. In my case, I've been to Asia because I have this contract with the Chinese government, and it's for training interpreters. Okay, so it's very challenging, and I have assistants, and I learn a lot by interacting with other cultures. I guess that right now YouTube is a great channel for acquiring more world knowledge or culture, reading. But the thing is that unfortunately my students, the young students, are too much time on Netflix. Okay, I'm sorry. I mean, that could improve their world knowledge to a certain extent, but it's not going to make them experts at world knowledge. So you need to be very, very selective on the kind of things that you read and you watch. How do you deal with, there's another question here. Tatiana, is there any way that you could click answer live and answer live to the questions that I have already replied?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question by Angel Landeros. How do you deal with mental fatigue after 45 minutes of simultaneous interpretation? All right. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be posting for them something that I see in Google Drive. I have something already in my Google Drive that is a 1-hour talk on geology. Okay, something that that I have interpreted with Tatiana. Okay, let me see if here. Okay, loading. Hang on a second. Anyone with the internet with this link can, yes. All right, this is gonna be good. Wait. To everyone. Paste. Can you see that? That is a Google Drive link. Please copy that before we end this session. And you could view online a dual track recording of one of the, I think it was the Dutch speaker. And you are going to see my translation for an hour, non-stop. I think it's an hour and 5 minutes. And if you analyze the translation, I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of strategies applied, whether it is meaning-based, delivery-based strategies, language-based strategies, knowledge-based strategies, and loss of terminology. But at least that will reply your question on how I deal with fatigue, okay? Let me see, 33 questions. Oh God. Paola, what to do when you realize a significant mistake has been made and the speaker continues speaking? Repair or not? You do, yes, you have to repair, okay? You have to repair. And sometimes it's not your mistake. Sometimes I notice that even speakers make mistakes. And if they are serious mistakes, I make sure that I repair them in the translation, although that is not advisable, okay, depending on the kind of conference you're in. What else? What other resources can you recommend? Oh, I'm sorry, but we have like more than 40 questions. Let's see. What other resources can you recommend to practice particularly difficult speeches aside from the UN site? The European Union, the European Commission has a lot of speeches, and they also have the channels. Because the good thing about the strategies is you're going to learn those strategies when you use them in practice by professionals or practitioners in the industry. I mean, you're not going to learn the strategies by listening to, I don't know, the first year or second year student, okay? So I think that in this case, and I know other universities, like for example, the University of Geneva, that does demonstrations with their instructors all the time, and they teach this. Do you recommend taking extra vitamins or vitamins for the brain? No, and I'm sorry if the kind of pictures that I showed in my PowerPoint were kind of misleading because there was a brain and all of that, but I didn't mean that in connection with any vitamins. I'm sorry. And I don't know, Emma, to tell you the truth. Also, John says, how would you interpret oral speeches with a text when the speaker uses a lot of digressions from the written speech and he's reading aloud? Okay, you're referring to the most difficult discipline of simultaneous interpretation that is called simultaneous with text. That is the last topic that I teach at the advanced levels, because you need to monitor, you need to read, you have the split attention of listening, and it's very, very difficult, okay? You're not going to, I cannot explain the whole strategy right now, but if you type or you Google simultaneous with text, I am sure that you're going to receive a lot of information. There's a lot of research posted online on simultext, okay? Especially right now with remote simultaneous interpreting with RSI, it has become very, very popular because everybody's reading, okay? All presenters are reading their speeches and they are speeding up, they are rehearsing. I mean, when we had in-person events, there's no way that they could have done that, okay? How do you deal with use of acronyms and names? Another question that are in the target language. Okay, I try to leave the acronyms and names and try to use them. As you can see, an hour and 25 minutes is my limit. I've been speaking for so long.
It's been a long presentation, and you've been wonderful. Yeah. You've been wonderful and very clear. There are lots of messages thanking you, saying how interesting the presentation was. Everybody's really happy, and of course they can play it again, because as you said, this has been recorded. So they will have the possibility of watching again. And sometimes when you watch it the second time, there are a few things that maybe
Amalia, I cannot see you.
Oh, sorry. Here I am.
Okay, good.
Here I am.
All right.
I was so concentrated reading all the messages and all the, the very interesting questions that people have been asking and all the comments. So sorry, I forgot about the camera. But yes, everybody's very happy with with all the great tactics and strategies that you shared with us today. So thank you so much for all the tips that you have given.
I'm sure that it's going to take some time. The strategies are usually teachable in the advanced levels. Okay, but
it takes practice and patience as well.
Yeah, practice makes perfect. And apart from that, I sometimes do these demos even with the second year students, okay? Just to show them that it's not that we translate word for word, okay? And it's an eye opener for them. So at first, what I like students to do is like to master the simultaneous interpretation technique by identifying the noun and then the pre-modifiers, the post-modifiers, and the verb. But at the same time, I show them that that is not really how we do it all the time in the real world, okay? Okay, it was nice having you here. It's 9:30 already, 9:27. But we had 130 people joining us, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that we post all the material online. You make sure that you copy that link, the Google Drive link, because that takes you to the dual track of the 1 hour conference that I was telling you about. As a matter of fact, it's more than 1 hour, but I had to split the recording in 1 hour. And also make sure that you visit these two websites. Let me see. And also our Facebook. Let me also post
and also the different courses that are available, that you publish always in the website.
Especially also the whatchamacallit, that we have a Facebook page that there they will find the recordings that we're going to post. And we have posted some research articles on Retour there. Okay, make sure that you copy the Facebook page, especially. In the Facebook page, you have articles, you have also talks delivered by esteemed professors, professors from the University of Geneva. That is where most of the research has been done, okay? So stay tuned. We're going to be organizing, because I didn't have time to cover all the strategies. So in 2 weeks, we're going to have Simultaneous Interpretation Strategies Part 2, where I'm going to be speaking about other strategies like text expansion additions, neutralization, evasion, omission, skipping, repairing, narrowing the ear-voice span, and other things, okay? So stay tuned and make sure that you attend the following seminar, okay? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Martin, so much. And thanks everyone for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Goodbye.
Thanks, Goodbye.